the jewel of disdain, the tycoon. Who insulted the millionaire? Subscribe and hit that bell. You won't want to miss how this man, full of arrogance, discovers that the woman he abandoned with $5,000 now owns his entire future. Warning: this story contains a jaw-dropping plot twist, public humiliation, and the sweetest revenge ever served. The world stops for her. The lobby of the Crucible restaurant was a cathedral of wealth, all muted tones and polished dark woods. Mark Durant adjusted his tie, the silk chafing his neck. He was trying to impress his new girlfriend, Tiffany, and this was the perfect setting. "It's all about access, babe," he whispered, leaning in. "The people who eat here run the city." He was boasting about his biggest career break, a new commission that would finally put him in the seven-figure club. He raised his champagne glass, just as the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. A woman was being escorted toward the private VIP section, and when she turned, Mark's world tilted on its axis. It was his ex-wife, and she was wearing a diamond ring the size of a small planet. The new world and the dead weight. Mark Durant, 42, loved the sound of the Crucible. It was the murmur of power, the discreet clinking of fine crystal, the rustle of bespoke suits. This was his new world, the one he deserved, the world for which he had discarded his old life. Across from him, Tiffany, her 24, vibrated with excitement. In her vibrant red dress, she was the perfect accessory. "I still can't believe you got us a table, Mark," she said, filming the chandelier with her phone. "They say the Crucible has a 6-month waiting list. It's not about the waiting list, Tiff. It's about who you know. And the maitre d', Mr. Brooks, knows I'm a serious player." Mark leaned in, lowering his voice. "The deal I'm closing is the big one, the Sentinel Tower. No one can get a meeting with the new owner, a mysterious entity. But my firm trusts me to handle the leasing proposals. We're talking millions in commission, babe." "Mark, that's incredible. We could finally get that downtown apartment." "Apartment? Think penthouse." He ordered Dom Perignon, an investment in his own image. Tiffany paused, with a genuine flicker of curiosity. "What was she like? Your ex-wife? You never talk about her." Mark's smile tightened. The mere thought of Laura was like sand in his teeth. "Laura," he scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "What's there to talk about? She was comfortable, safe, boring. She was the type of woman who uses coupons. Her idea of a 5-star dinner was the corner Italian place. Lacked ambition. She was dead weight." "Wow," Tiffany said, her lip curled. "I can't even picture you with someone like that." "You don't have to. That life is over. I cut her out like a tumor. She would never fit in here. She'd probably be complaining about the prices. This is my place." In that moment of supreme arrogance, the front of the restaurant fell silent. What looked like a celebrity caused every head to turn. The maitre d', Mr. Brooks, famous for his icy demeanor, was bowing. He personally escorted a guest toward the ultra-exclusive private reserved section. Mark narrowed his eyes. She wore a simple, elegant black dress. As she passed under the light of the central chandelier, she turned her head slightly. Mark's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His blood ran cold. It was Laura, the impossible diamond. The memory of the breakup hit him with the force of a punch. The final confrontation, the day he told her the house was a cage and he wanted a divorce, and the ensuing cruelty. Mark, eager to cut ties, had been methodical. He had diverted assets for months. Laura's lawyer had told her, "I'm sorry, Ms. Valdez. Your ex-husband has drained the joint accounts. He claims they were corporate expense reimbursements. It's a legal loophole, deeply cynical. By the time we fight this, it will cost you more than it's worth to track it down." Mark had offered her £5,000 for 15 years of shared life. He had systematically erased her. She had moved into a tiny flat above a laundry shop. She had been burned. And from the ashes, something hard, cold, and Sharp had remained. She had taken the 400 she had left and rented time in a bakery at 2 a.m. She was a brilliant data analyst, but her passion was baking, her grandmother's chocolate recipes. She used her analyst skills to create algorithms, sourcing single-origin cacao beans at a fraction of the cost. She spent her last check on 50 kilos of beans. Vale Artisan Chocolates was born. She wasn't just a chocolatier. She was a businesswoman who had sworn she would never, ever be on the losing side of the table again. She read up on corporate law, asset protection, and shell corporations, LLCs. She had invested her profits and bought commercial real estate. She had become L. Vale, the mysterious entity, and her last big deal had been closing on an 8-figure property. The Sentinel Tower had been foreclosed, and L. Vale had bought it for a song, in cash. The building that was Mark's big break was now just another asset in her portfolio. The ring on her hand was a celebration. She had bought it herself, a 10-carat canary diamond. It wasn't an engagement ring. It was a trophy. Mark, who is that?" Tiffany's voice was sharp. "You're white as a ghost. Is that her?" "Be quiet," Mark hissed. Mr. Brooks was holding the velvet rope to the reserved section. "Your usual table is prepared, Ms. Valdez. We have your preferred mineral water." "Thank you, Robert," Laura said. She called him Robert. Mark had groveled to this man and called him Mr. Brooks. Laura stepped into the reserved section, not even looking at the main dining room. She was focused, a shark moving in the water. "She must be with someone," Mark stammered, trying to construct a narrative that made sense. "That's it. She must have landed some rich old man. It's the only way." "She looks incredible," Tiffany said, sharp with envy. "That dress, the row, it costs like 12,000 quid, Mark." "It's probably a knockoff," Mark snapped. Then Laura gestured to the waiter, and the light from the fireplace hit her left hand. An impossible, blinding flash crossed the room. Tiffany gasped audibly. "Oh my God!" Tiffany grabbed his arm. "Mark, look at her hand." Mark leaned in. He saw it. It wasn't a modest ring. It was a rock. A massive, canary yellow diamond. A statement of independence. It was larger, brighter, and clearly more expensive than the 3-carat ring he had promised Tiffany. Should Mark retreat and pretend he didn't see her, or will his ego force him to confront her? Vote in the comments. The crash. The farce exposed. Mark stood up, his ego mortally wounded. He strode toward the private section, feeling like a lion, reclaiming his territory. Laura didn't look up. She was working on a tablet. "Laura." Mark cleared his throat loudly. She slowly lifted her head. Their eyes met, and for a moment there was nothing. No surprise, no fear, no anger. Just. She looked through him, as if he were a waiter she hadn't called. Then a flicker. She recognized him, and an almost imperceptible sigh of annoyance escaped her. "Mark," she said, her voice flat and utterly devoid of emotion. "You're a long way from the corner Italian." The hit was so precise, using his own past insult, that it stunned him. Tiffany scurried up behind him, pale. "Mark, what are you doing?" "Hello, Tiffany," Laura said calmly. "It's good to put a face to the yacht photos." Tiffany turned crimson, realizing this woman knew everything. "You're celebrating, are you?" Mark pressed, ignoring Tiffany's shock. "Finally caught one? He must be very old and very rich to let you in here. And to buy you that?" Laura raised an eyebrow. "You haven't changed at all, have you, Mark? Still impressed by things you can't afford. Still thinking the only way a woman can own anything is if a man gives it to her. Come on." Mark gave a forced laugh. "Are you going to tell me you bought that yourself with tips from your data entry job? Did you sell a lot of cupcakes from that hobby of yours?" "You're right. Our social media presence is terrible," Laura said, and for the first time she smiled. A cold, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. I've been quite busy with other things, logistics, international distribution, real estate. It's terribly time-consuming." "Who is he?" Mark demanded, abandoning all pretense. "Who bought you that ring?" Laura looked at Tiffany. For a fraction of a second, her expression softened into something that looked like pity. "There is no he, Tiffany." Then she looked back at Mark, her gaze hardening. "And as for the ring, yes, Mark, I bought it myself. For me." "Liar," Mark snarled, losing control. "That's a 10-carat canary yellow diamond. That's a 1,000,000-pound jewel." At that precise moment, Mr. Brooks materialized beside Mark. His voice was pure steel. "Mr. Durant, I must ask you to return to your table. You are harassing Ms. Valdez." "Harassing?" Mark yelled. "She's my ex-wife. We're just catching up." "Mr. Durant, I will not ask again. Either you return to your table, or I will have security remove you from the premises." "You'd throw me out." The public humiliation was unbearable. "Do you know who I am? Do you know the deal I'm closing? It's on the Sentinel Tower. The commission is more than your entire annual salary." The name had an instant effect, but not the one Mark expected. Laura dropped her calm. The look of indifference melted away, replaced by a cold "Fukuoka." "The Sentinel Tower," she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "What deal are you closing, Mark?" He smirked, feeling he had finally touched her core. His world, his power. "Interested now, are we?" "Yes, my firm is handling the new leases. It's a huge deal. The new owner, an entity called L. Vale. They're about to make me a very, very rich man." Laura stared at him. 10 silent seconds. Then, she did something Mark had never seen her do. She threw her head back and let out a rich, booming laugh that echoed through the silenced room. "Oh, Mark," she said, wiping an amused tear. "You truly have have no idea, do you?" "What?" he growled, his face turning purple. "What is so funny?" Laura stopped laughing and leaned in, her expression clinically precise. "L. Vale, the mysterious entity. What do you think the L stands for?" Mark's blood turned to ice. He couldn't breathe. "What? What did you say, L?" "L. Vale," Laura repeated, tapping her tablet as if speaking to a slow child. "For Laura Valdez. Me." The silence was a crushing void. Tiffany gasped. "I bought the building 3 months ago, Mark," Laura said, her voice as hard as slate. "All cash. The L. Vale entity is my primary holding company. The Crucible," she gestured around the restaurant, "is my tenant. This building is my property." Mark staggered, grabbing the velvet rope to steady himself. "I make chocolates." Laura nodded calmly. "And Vale Artisan is about to become the anchor tenant. This will," she lifted her hand, rotating the canary diamond, "was a bonus, a commission to myself, for closing that deal." She looked at him, stripped of all pity. "You always said I knew nothing about money. Seems I'm a fast learner." Mr. Brooks intervened with grim satisfaction. "Mr. Durant, Ms. Valdez has clarified the situation. You are, in fact, trespassing on her property. You are harassing the owner. If you do not return to your table, pay your bill, and leave immediately, I will have you arrested." "The bill," Mark muttered, dazed. Tiffany looked at Mark. Her envy for Laura was gone. It was replaced by cold, reptilian disdain. "Mark, do something. Laura, please." The word was a dry, desperate croak. Mark clung to the back of an empty chair. His facade had melted away, revealing the small, terrified man he had always been. "I swear I didn't know. I was an idiot, a complete arrogant fool. We can work together. You need a broker. I can handle the leasing for you." Laura let his pathetic offer hang in the air until the silence was unbearable. "Help me," she repeated, sheathing her words with lethal precision. You are the man who couldn't manage a bank account without stealing from it. You come to my restaurant, bragging about a big deal you just ruined because you couldn't control your pathetic ego. Not only are you no help, Mark, you are a liability. She turned, her back fully to him. Robert, she said, addressing Brooks. My partners from Zurich arrive in 5 minutes. Please have a bottle of Dom Perignon P2, the 1998 vintage, not the swill Mr. Durant drinks, sent to my private conference room upstairs. She paused and looked at Tiffany. A piece of advice, Tiffany. If you're going to be a gold digger, make sure you look for actual gold, not just brass. Then, she looked at Mark one last time. Her face was utterly empty. Have a good life, Mark, or don't. Honestly, I don't care. She disappeared through an unmarked door. Door in the back. Mark stood there. Tiffany snatched her purse from the table and walked away. She didn't cry. She simply left, disappearing into the night. Mark was alone. He slumped into his chair. The waiter approached and placed a small leather folder in front of him. The bill was 1,985. His bank balance was 1,000 toad. He had maxed out his credit cards on the champagne and the diamond bracelet for Tiffany. He was trapped. He was about to be arrested for theft of services. As he sat paralyzed, the waiter returned. He placed a small, impossibly elegant black box on the table. A simple gold V was embossed on the lid. Sir, I was asked to add this to your table, courtesy of the owner. Mark opened the box. Inside, nestled in black velvet, were 2 perfect, shimmering, dark chocolate truffles, dusted with edible gold. Mark looked at the chocolates. He looked at the bill. And for the first time in 15 years, he felt the absolute weight of his own failure. He had called her dead weight, but realized she was the only thing that had kept him afloat. Laura didn't just get revenge. She got everything. What do you think of Laura's ultimate revenge? Did Mark deserve the public humiliation and the end of his career? Share your thoughts in the comments. The redemption and the legacy of the liability. Mark Durant's fall was immediate, public, and devastating. The managing partner of his firm fired him over the phone the next morning. The official reason: violation of the morality clause and sabotaging a relationship with a key client. Mark was not just out of a job. He was marked across the entire London real estate sector. His personal life crumbled just as quickly. When he arrived at his flat, the lock was changed. Tiffany had drained the joint accounts, leaving a succinct note. I left with your boss. He can actually afford the Dom Perignon. You're not a player, Mark. You're a joke. Mark ended up in a roadside hotel, alone, watching as London's digital gossip media ran the photo of his humiliated face at the Crucible, alongside headlines like, The Deflated Tycoon, The Yellow Diamond Revenge. 3 months later, Mark was at his lowest. Broke, friendless, and without dignity, he wandered through Hyde Park, looking for a job as a waiter, or anything that would allow him to eat. The man who had boasted about his access now had access to nothing. The window of truth. One cold morning, while Mark sat on a park bench, he saw a familiar sight. The imposing entrance of the Sentinel Tower, the building that now belonged to Laura. Fate, or perhaps the cruelty he himself had sown, led him to the ground floor, where the majestic new flagship store of Vale Artisan Chocolate stood. Laura's storefront was an architectural triumph, all glass, dark wood, and the intoxicating aroma of pure cacao. Mark looked through the window. Inside was a hive of activity, smiling staff serving thick hot chocolate. He was stopped in his tracks by the sight of the floor manager, a woman in her 40s with kind yet firm eyes. It was Sarah, his former data entry clerk, the single mother Laura had hired first. She was thriving. Mark watched Laura Valdez emerge from an inner office. She was dressed with sober elegance, wearing her trophy ring. She leaned in to speak with the manager. and the manager laughed. It was a scene of professionalism, humanity, and success. Next to Laura, a tall man, with an expression of absolute respect, handed her documents. It was Robert Brooks, the former maitre d' of the Crucible, who was now the director of real estate operations for El Vale. Mark had been replaced not just by Laura, but by the very staff he had once looked down upon. The final courtesy, as Mark prepared to slink away, ashamed to be seen, he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Durant." It was Sarah, the floor manager. There was no mockery in her eyes, only a melancholy pity. "Ms. Valdez asked me to give you this." She handed him a small paper envelope. "She knew you would come. She said you needed something." Mark opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a check. Not a large sum, but enough to cover a couple of months' rent on a small flat and buy him time to look for a decent job. The check was signed by El Vale Holdings. Alongside the check was a small business card. The Second Act Fund, Mentorship and Employment. "It's not charity," Sarah said, reading his expression. "It's a small investment. Ms. Valde believes everyone, even you, is entitled to a second act. She said you have skills, Mark. You just used them poorly." She looked him in the eye, and finally gave him an order he couldn't disobey. "Now, please use this to rebuild your foundation, not to sink further." Sarah returned to the store. Mark was left with the check in one hand and the box of truffles Laura had given him that night, which he had kept in his inner suit pocket, in the other. Laura hadn't given him a second chance. She had given him the tool to build one himself. She hadn't saved him. She had given him the first ingredient. Mark Duran learned the most expensive lesson of his life. The only person who sank was not the one left with nothing, but the one who believed that wealth was measured by what you own, and not by what you build with integrity. The Redemption and the Legacy of the Liability, additional chapter. 3 years after his humiliation, Mark, now 45, founded his own micro firm, Fides Realty, Faith Realty. He specialized in helping small business owners find affordable office space in emerging neighborhoods, reversing the speculation model he had once championed. He became known for his brutal honesty and his refusal to overstate properties. Slowly, he earned a reputation. The man who wouldn't lie to you. One day, he received a small, unsolicited offer for a property his client wanted. The offer came from a Zurich-based holding company. Mark, adhering to his new firm's ethics, insisted on a meeting. The meeting took place in a central London law office. When Mark entered, he saw the other person in the room was Sarah, the floor manager turned entrepreneur and partner to Laura. "Sarah," Mark nodded, returning her professional respect. "I didn't expect to see you." "Ms. Valdez is investing in that neighborhood," Sarah said. "The Second Act Fund needs space. We want to open a training center there." Sarah slid a folder across the table. It contained not an eviction notice, but a partnership contract. "Ms. Valde is offering your client a larger renovated space nearby at a lower price, and she is offering you the contract to manage the leasing of the foundation's properties in that area." Mark was speechless. It wasn't a favor. It was a business deal. She wasn't saving him. She was validating him in the new world he had built. "Why me, Sarah?" Mark asked, his voice barely audible. "My firm is tiny." Sarah looked at Mark. "The check she gave you was a character test, Mark. She wanted to see if you could rebuild on the foundation of Fides, faith, you preach now. And your clients prove it. You are the most honest agent we've found in this neighborhood." Mark accepted. He became the primary ethical voice in London's commercial real estate sector. A year later, he received a small black box, identical to the one given to him at the Crucible. Inside, there were no truffles, but a small, elegant sign that read, "Fides Realty Partner, well done." Next to it, a note. Not from Laura, but from Alan Sterling. Lena's husband in the previous story, a character Mark knew from the tech world. Mark, Laura asked me to send this. She doesn't see you as a humiliated ex-husband. She sees you as a testament. And once she confessed to me that you and your initial cruelty were, ironically, her strongest anchor. You were her final obstacle, and by overcoming you, she found her true self. Thank you for teaching her that expensive lesson. Mark smiled. He had been the dead weight that, when cut, had allowed Laura to sail to greatness. And now, ironically, the dead weight had become the foundation of integrity that allowed him to join her cause. Mark Durant never recovered his old wealth, but he did recover something infinitely more valuable: his honor. And the final chocolate truffle, the sweetest reminder of his failure, became the symbol of his redemption. Laura Valdez proved that the ultimate victory is not about making the other fall, but rising so high that the other's downfall becomes irrelevant. And by giving Mark the tools for his own redemption, she cemented her legacy as the true builder of second acts. This marks the incredible conclusion of Laura's journey. If you believe that restoration is the sweetest revenge, please leave a final comment below and subscribe to Narratives and Memories. Check out the next story we have for you. Chapter 8. The Global Palette and the Equal Partner. Welcome to the next stage of Laura's empire. If you believe that true partnership is the ultimate prize, hit that like button and let us know. What global city should Vale Artisan Chocolates conquer next? The expanding empire. 4 years had passed since the incident at the Crucible. Laura Valdez was 39, a global figure of quiet, formidable power. Vale Artisan Chocolates was preparing for its most ambitious expansion, opening flagship stores in Tokyo and Paris. Her partnership with Mark Durant's Feeds Realty had blossomed into a highly ethical and profitable collaboration. Mark, now a figure of respect, managed the foundation's growing portfolio of commercial properties, his honesty proving to be an invaluable asset in the cutthroat real estate world. Laura stood in the newly acquired Tokyo retail space, a minimalist temple of polished concrete and cedar wood. She was on a video call with Mark, reviewing final leasing details. "The local brokers are impressed with your efficiency, Mark," Laura noted, a rare smile touching her lips. "They said Fides is the most transparent firm they've ever worked with." Mark, now 46, looked older, wiser, and fundamentally kinder. "It's easy to be transparent, Laura, when your client's only goal is purpose, not greed. Besides, I owe the Fides faith to you. Just make sure the Tokyo store has plenty of the single-origin Peruvian bars. They're my reward. Consider it done, partner." The conversation was purely professional, devoid of the past's shadows. Mark was living his honest second act, and Laura was grateful for his loyalty and transformation. But Laura's private life, the space she fiercely protected, remained solitary. She had dated a kind, successful architect, a thoughtful scientist, but no one felt like an equal partner. She didn't need a provider. She needed a challenge, a vision, and a man who was utterly secure in her success. The Parisian challenge, the biggest obstacle in the Paris expansion, was securing the perfect location in the Marais district, a historic building with protected status. The property was owned by a notoriously difficult and secretive Parisian family, the Dufresne, who refused to sell to large American corporations. Laura flew to Paris to handle the negotiation herself. She arrived at a stunning 18th century hotel. Particulier for the meeting. The main decision-maker was the grandson of the matriarch, Etienne Dufresne. Etienne, 41, was a historian and preservationist, not a businessman. He was elegant, skeptical, and fiercely protective of his family's legacy. "Ms. Valdez," Etienne began coolly, I respect that you bought the Sentinel Tower in London, but we are not selling this building to make way for yet another mass-market chocolate brand. Vale Artisan is not mass-market, Mr. Dufresne, Laura countered, placing a box of her finest truffles on the antique table. We are about quality, sourcing, and the story of the cacao bean. Our philosophy, much like your family's, is about preserving authenticity and turning passion into art. Etienne refused to be charmed by the London mogul. I appreciate the sentiment, but your world of rapid acquisition contrasts sharply with our world of slow, careful preservation. The negotiations stalled. Laura had offered a fair price, a promise to restore the facade, and a commitment to hiring local artisans. But Etienne remained unmoved. How should Laura approach Etienne? Should she increase her offer dramatically, or appeal to his passion for preservation and history? Share your strategy. The taste of partnership. Frustrated, Laura decided to stop the aggressive corporate approach. She spent the afternoon touring the Marais, seeking inspiration. She found Etienne later that evening, alone in a quiet, historic library, researching documents. She didn't talk business. She talked history. Your family's building, Mr. Dufresne, Laura began softly. It was originally a print shop, wasn't it? The same place that printed the first French editions of the classics. Etienne looked up, surprised. That's correct. How did you know? I'm an art history major, Mr. Dufresne. I love history, and I see a beautiful symmetry. A building that once housed the passion for storytelling, now housing a passion for craftsmanship. My chocolate isn't just a bar. It's a story of soil, sun, and skill. Etienne's skepticism began to melt. They talked for hours, not about the contract, but about French philosophy, sustainable agriculture, and the importance of preserving an honest legacy. A week later, Etienne called Laura. Ms. Valde, I will sell you the building, he said. Not for the money, but for your commitment to the story. But I have one condition. I want to be your silent, permanent advisor for the Paris location. I will handle all local preservation, historical outreach, and cultural partnerships. I will protect its soul. Laura paused, a genuine smile lighting up her face. This wasn't a condition. It was an invitation. She had found a man who valued something more than money, and who wanted to be her partner, not her subordinate. Mr. Dufresne, Laura said, her voice warm. I accept. Not as a condition, but as an honor. Welcome to the El Vale team. The ultimate trophy. The Paris flagship store opened a year later to immense acclaim, recognized as much for its architectural preservation as its exceptional chocolates. Etienne was an indispensable partner, and his presence added a cultural depth that elevated the Vale Artisan brand. Their professional relationship evolved naturally. Etienne was drawn to Laura's decisive intelligence and global vision. Laura was captivated by Etienne's quiet integrity and his deep-rooted knowledge, a grounding force she realized she had been craving. Laura was no longer seeking a trophy in life. But one night, Etienne presented her with one. It wasn't a canary diamond. It was a custom-made, antique silver signet ring, engraved with the crest of his family's original print shop, a quill pen intertwined with a cacao pod. Laura, he said, taking her hand, you once told a foolish man that the jewel you wear is a trophy for a battle won. I offer you this. It represents a different kind of victory, the victory of finding home. Will you let me be your partner in both the story you tell and the life you build? Laura looked at the ring, then at Etienne. He saw her, the art history student, the resilient entrepreneur, the woman of integrity. He saw her as an equal. She smiled, the ultimate expression of her hard-won peace. Yes, Etienne, let's write our next chapter together. Laura Valdez, the woman who had lost everything to a cruel man's arrogance, had not only reclaimed her fortune, but had finally found the partner who understood that the true value of a legacy is measured not in cash, but in the truth and love with which it is built. The final victory wasn't the diamond, it was the equal partnership. What an incredible journey. Laura found her intellectual and emotional match. Do you think Laura will ever fully forgive Mark? Or is indifference the true final stage of healing? What kind of legacy will Laura and Etienne build together? Thank you for following Laura's inspiring journey. Leave your final thoughts and subscribe to Narratives and Memories for our next unforgettable story. Chapter 9. The Hidden Secret of the Marais. Welcome back to Narratives and Memories. If you love a good treasure hunt mixed with romance and intrigue, smash that like button. And tell us, what piece of history do you think is hidden in a centuries-old Parisian building? The seamless partnership. 3 years into their marriage, Laura Valdez and Etienne Dufresne had achieved a partnership that was the envy of 2 continents. Their home life, split between a sun-drenched penthouse in Manhattan and Etienne's meticulously restored family apartment in Paris, was a harmonious blend of American drive and French joie de vivre. Professionally, the synergy was unstoppable. Vale Artisan Chocolates and Etienne's Heritage Preservation Consultancy had merged their philosophies. The Paris flagship in the Marais was a global success, recognized by UNESCO for its perfect blending of commerce and conservation. Mark Durant's Fides Realty continued to thrive as their ethical leasing arm. Laura's life was complete, defined by meaningful work, unwavering self-respect, and a partner who cherished her as an equal. The shadow of Mark Durant's betrayal was a distant memory, reduced to a footnote in her spectacular biography. The scroll and the suspicion, the unexpected challenge arose not from the business world, but from the building itself. Etienne, overseeing the final phase of restoration in the Marais building's basement archives, an area that once housed the print shop's oldest documents, discovered a hidden compartment behind a loose shelf. Inside, nestled in a velvet sleeve, was a single parchment scroll, brittle with age. The scroll was a handwritten, exquisitely illuminated manuscript detailing the printing press's first commissions, dating back to the late 1700s. It wasn't just a historical document. It was a direct lineage of the building's intellectual property and its physical structure. However, near the end of the scroll, a cryptic cipher was scribbled in the margin, accompanied by a small, delicate drawing of a caduceus, the symbol of the Greek god Hermes. Etienne, the cautious historian, was thrilled. Laura, the former data analyst, saw a puzzle and a potential liability. The caduceus wasn't the symbol of the print shop, Etienne, Laura mused, tracing the symbol on a digitized image. It was the symbol of merchants and often secret societies. This is more than a historical note. It's a marker. Laura used her old network of investigative contacts, the same ones who helped her expose Mark, to quietly research the symbol. The results were immediate and unnerving. The caduceus was associated with a small, defunct, but highly secretive 18th century Parisian fraternity known for collecting rare art and financing clandestine operations. They had found a secret, and it had the potential to be either a priceless historical find or a dangerous liability. The unwanted attention, the threat materialized subtly. Etienne began receiving calls, unlisted numbers, deep voices, asking about the caduceus documentation. Then a break-in attempt occurred at the Marais building. Not an obvious theft, but a professional disabling of the security system, followed by a targeted search of the basement archive. Laura and Etienne immediately moved the scroll to a secure vault. "Someone is looking for this, Etienne," Laura stated, her analytical mind in full command. "And they are not preservationists. They are looking for whatever the cipher unlocks." Etienne, though worried, was focused on protecting the artifact. "We must find out what the cipher means, Laura. The key might be hidden in the building's architecture itself." Laura, Ever the pragmatist saw the bigger picture. We need to identify who is looking for it, and there'll be someone who profits from history, not someone who cherishes it. Laura tasked her security team with tracing the recent interested parties in the Marais district's historic properties. One name appeared repeatedly, a major, shadowy collector of European artifacts known for his aggressive acquisitions and dubious past. Damon Vance, no relation to Julian Vance from the previous story. Damon Vance, Laura read from the file. A billionaire collector with a reputation for acquiring items through unconventional means. He is currently based in Geneva. The game was no longer about real estate or chocolate. It was about protecting a piece of history from a modern-day pirate. If you were Laura, would you immediately contact the police, or would you use your resources to try and decipher the scroll and find the hidden treasure first? Vote and tell us why. The Marais' secret. Laura and Etienne combined their skills. Etienne analyzed the architecture of the Marais. Buildings' old print rooms, knowing the 18th century builders often used subtle markers. Laura focused on the cipher itself, using her deep analytical skills to break the code. Etienne discovered that the original print shop was built with precisely 18 steps leading down to the basement. The same number of letters in the French phrase, La vérité se cache dans l'encre. The truth is hidden in the ink. Meanwhile, Laura cracked the cipher using a combination of the print shop's frequent letter placements and the unique numerical patterns found in the illuminations. The message was simple, yet profound. Sous la plume, l'or 676. Beneath the quill, the gold sleeps. 1776. The quill was the symbol of the print shop's owner. The gold was not literal. It was likely an artifact of immense value, something the fraternity hid from the French Revolution's confiscation. Etienne's historian's mind immediately connected plume, quill, with the original owner's desk, which was a legendary antique rumored to have been sold off decades ago. The desk, the owner's personal desk, was the famous Dufresne Scriban, Etienne exclaimed. It was sold to a private collector in the 950s. If the scroll is correct, the artifact is hidden inside the desk. Laura instantly took action. We need to find that desk, Etienne, before Damon Vance does. Laura leveraged her global network. She didn't buy the desk. She located it. It was in a private vault in Monaco, owned by an old-money European family who believed the desk was simply a beautiful piece of furniture. In a carefully orchestrated move, Marc Durant, using the pretext of appraising historical assets for the Second Act Fund, flew to Monaco and negotiated a temporary loan of the desk for a historical exhibition. The desk arrived back in the Marais building under armed private security. In the quiet of the night, with the desk disassembled, Etienne found the hidden compartment, a small, lead-lined cylinder concealed within the central quill drawer. Inside was the treasure, a perfectly preserved, miniature jeweled clock crafted by the royal watchmakers of the 18th century, likely the most exquisite example of the period, and a historical artifact of incalculable value. The final partnership. The moment the clock was revealed, Damon Vance made his move. His agents, disguised as antique dealers, arrived at the Marais building, attempting to inspect the new artifacts. But Laura was ready. She didn't call the police. She called a press conference. Laura and Etienne stood before the world media, revealing the scroll and the magnificent jeweled clock. Etienne provided the historical context, emphasizing the importance of preserving history from clandestine operators. Laura provided the security context, revealing that Vance's agents were present and operating under false pretenses. The ensuing global media storm exposed Damon Vance's ruthless methods, forcing him to back down. The jeweled clock was safely donated to the Louvre Museum, cemented the building's historical status. and gave Vale Artisan an unprecedented profile of cultural integrity. Laura and Etienne had won, not by brute force, but by combining integrity, history, and sharp analytics. Their personal partnership had proven unbreakable, built on a foundation of mutual respect and the shared principle that true value lies in authenticity and legacy. The story of Laura Valdez and Etienne Dufresne showed that the strongest empire is not built on money or revenge, but on the intellectual and ethical synergy of two people who see each other's greatest strengths as their own. What an incredible journey. Laura and Etienne defeated the shadowy collector. What do you think was the most valuable part of the treasure? The clock or the scroll? Will Laura ever fully forgive Mark? Or is indifference the true final stage of healing? Thank you for following Laura's inspiring journey. Leave your final thoughts and subscribe to Narratives and Memories for our next unforgettable story. Chapter 10. The Unseen Partner and the Next Generation. Welcome back to the inspiring journey of Laura and Etienne. If you're excited to see what their combined legacy looks like, smash that like button. And tell us, what piece of history do you think should inspire Laura's next chocolate collection? Life in double harmony. 4 years into their marriage, Laura Valdez and Etienne Dufresne had found a sublime rhythm. Their life was a tapestry woven with American ambition and French antiquity. The Marais apartment was their hub, a place where Laura's analytical mind and Etienne's historical sensibilities met perfectly. Vale, artisan chocolates and Fides Realty were flourishing, and the jeweled clock, now safely displayed in the Louvre, stood as a permanent, priceless reminder of their triumph. But life's greatest achievements often come with its most profound challenges. The couple, now in their early 40s, had always prioritized their professional legacies. However, an undeniable yearning had begun to grow, the desire to create a legacy that was purely their own, a blend of Valdez drive and Dufresne wisdom. Laura, the woman who had meticulously planned every professional success, found herself confronting the one thing she couldn't control: starting a family. After years of focusing on business, they faced the unexpected difficulty of conception, an emotionally taxing process that tested the foundation of their calm, rational partnership. The test of truth, the emotional toll began to surface. Laura, accustomed to solving every problem with research and strategy, felt helpless. Etienne, the historian, dealt with the waiting and uncertainty with quiet, protective patience. One evening, after receiving disappointing news from a fertility specialist, Laura retreated to her home office, staring out at the Parisian rooftops. Etienne found her there, not crying, but staring intensely at an old photograph, the infamous image of her on the set of her first small bakery, alone, fierce, and determined. "You're looking at the warrior," Etienne observed softly. "I'm looking at the woman who could always fix things," Laura replied, her voice strained. "I fixed the company. I fixed the building. I even helped fix Mark's career. But I can't fix this." Etienne sat beside her, gently taking her hand, the one that wore the signet ring he had given her. "Laura, my love, you learned that true strength is in building an authentic life, not in conquering obstacles. This is not an obstacle to conquer. This is a journey to share. We are not competitors here. We are partners. And this is the one part of our story we must simply live through, not engineer." Laura leaned her head on his shoulder, finding solace in his quiet strength. He was the anchor she never knew she needed, a man who saw her vulnerability as deeply as he admired her power. What do you think is the biggest difference between Etienne's support and the way Mark would have handled this challenge? Share your thoughts in the comments. The unexpected inheritance. After months of this quiet struggle, Laura and Etienne made a decision. They would step back from aggressive fertility treatments and embrace their life as it was, focusing on their work and each other. They decided to dedicate their time and resources to the Second Act Fund in a new way, creating a dedicated mentorship program for single mothers. It was during this time of acceptance that the greatest, most unexpected surprise arrived. Mark Durant, who was now successfully running Fides Realty's ethical division, called Laura with astonishing news. He had been contacted by a social worker regarding a young child. "Laura, you're not going to believe this." Mark's voice was low, yet excited. "Remember the old woman who taught you about the original Peruvian cacao beans? The one you used to call Doña Elena?" "Of course," Laura said. "She was the first supplier who truly believed in me." "Doña Elena passed away 6 months ago," Mark explained. "She has a grandson, Daniel, 6, whom she was raising alone in London. The social workers found a small will she drew up. She named the only 2 people she trusted to raise him, her local priest and a woman named Laura Valde, the chocolate artist. Doña Elena, the humble supplier, had been silently watching Laura's journey, recognizing the same quiet strength and commitment in her that she possessed. Laura and Etienne looked at each other. They hadn't planned to adopt, but the universe had handed them a beautiful 6-year-old child with a direct connection to the roots of Laura's success. What would you do? Accept the unexpected responsibility and inherit Doña Elena's grandson, or focus on your own personal journey? But in the comments, the full circle. The decision was immediate and unanimous. Within months, Daniel Dufresne Valde moved into their home. Etienne, the meticulous historian, became the most patient, dedicated father. He taught Daniel about the stories hidden in the Parisian streets and the importance of preserving the past. Laura, the ambitious entrepreneur, found a new, profound purpose, teaching Daniel that confidence isn't earned through arrogance, but through integrity and skill. The Marais apartment, once a sanctuary for 2 professionals, was now alive with the joyful chaos of a family. One afternoon, Daniel was in Laura's test kitchen, meticulously grating Peruvian cacao beans. "Maman," he asked, using the French term for mother, "why is your chocolate so special?" Laura knelt beside him, her hands covered in chocolate dust. "Because it's real, sweetie. It honors the journey of the bean and the skill of the person making it. We don't try to be something we're not." Etienne walked in, smiling. "And it's also special because it reminds us that the best parts of life are often unexpected gifts," he added, kissing Laura's forehead. Laura looked at her husband and her son. She had once thought her life would be defined by the diamond she bought herself, the trophy of her escape. She now realized her life was defined by the family she created and the love that found her when she stopped trying to engineer perfection. The final, most beautiful chapter of Laura's story was not about revenge or money, but about the profound, unexpected fulfillment of building a genuine home and the ultimate victory of love over loss. What a beautiful ending. Laura and Etienne found their true legacy in Daniel. How do you think Daniel will carry on the legacy of Vale Artisan and the Dufresne name? What should Laura focus on next? The Single Mothers Fund, or Mark's continued ethical growth? Thank you for following Laura's inspiring journey. Leave your final thoughts and subscribe to Narratives and Memories for our next unforgettable story.